Welcome to The Record. I'm Mark Maxwell. A political battle is brewing over gun laws in Jefferson City. Federal courts recently ruled Missouri's Second Amendment Preservation Act unconstitutional. It would have forbidden local or federal law enforcement from placing limits on who can buy a gun or where they can purchase one anywhere inside state lines. Rep. Brad Hudson joining us now on The Record. Thank you for joining us. You plan to file a bill very soon that would preempt or block this local ordinance in Jackson County that raises the legal age to buy a gun there to 21 years old. That's like 200 miles away from you. Why are you getting involved?
Well, that's a good question. I'll tell you. So we've got two situations really that are going on here, and two things we need to look at with regard to what's happened in Jackson County. First of all, we have the ordinance that has already been done in Jackson County. The Attorney General's office is dealing with that. The executive branch is dealing with that. But from a legislative perspective, we need to consider that if Jackson County is willing to ignore Missouri law and enact something like this, what would stop other counties or cities from trying to do that? So the legislation that I plan to file would not only affect Jackson County, it would affect the entire state of Missouri. And what it would say would be, if you want to enact gun control that is above and beyond what Missouri law says, if you want to do that, then we're going to allow citizens whose rights have been violated to sue the political subdivisions that do that to them.
Mm-hmm. Political subdivisions, shorthand for cities or counties.
Cities, counties.
Yeah, you said that you're a firm believer in local control in this press release, but are you really? If you really believed in local control, you would let Wright County, your home county, decide. And I would note, Wright County voted more heavily for Donald Trump than any other county in the state of Missouri. Why would they vote to roll back gun rights?
So my Stone County, or my home county, Stone County, and that particular, when you talk about local control, I absolutely believe in local control, but not to the extent when municipalities and counties, political subdivisions that are created by the state, actually would trample on the rights of their citizens. You cannot allow a county or a city to ignore what is one's constitutional right and to just flagrantly ignore the law in doing so. So yes, local control is great, but not when it comes to the point when individuals are enacting tyranny on their citizens.
Yeah, you just used the word unconstitutional. You've called Jackson County's age limits on gun purchases a, quote, clearly unconstitutional gun grab. I'm not sure it's either unconstitutional or a gun grab. Let's start there. Whose guns are they grabbing?
Law-abiding adults, the ages 18, 19, and 20, and it is absolutely unconstitutional because we've got something in this country that is called the Second Amendment that says the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Individuals who are young adults who want to protect themselves, who want to exercise their Second Amendment rights and do so in a law-abiding way, should be able to do that without government interference. So yes, I would say it is absolutely unconstitutional, and they are trying to keep law-abiding citizens from being able to possess firearms. That goes against what this country was founded upon.
Mm-hmm. So just to be clear for our audience, it refers to, in Jackson County, the ordinance refers to 18, 19, and 20-year-olds only. It does allow them to keep the guns they have and to bear them in limited places, at a gun range, in their home. It specifically allows them to keep the guns that they have now. So again, I ask, whose guns are they grabbing?
This is big government telling people that we are going to decide when and where you can exercise your Second Amendment rights. My wife and I were both 20 years old when we got married. It's ridiculous to think that the government would come in and tell us, well, we're going to decide that you can have firearms in this particular situation, but you can't have them in that particular situation. And when you're talking about some of these cities and some of these places in the state of Missouri where crime is very high, where individuals do not feel safe, they should be able to defend themselves.
A recent Fox News poll conducted just last year found that 81% of Americans favor raising the age to buy a gun to 21. That's all guns, not just handguns. You clearly disagree with that. Would you support rolling back the age limits altogether and letting just anyone buy a gun?
I'll say this. I'm not going to, comment too much on that particular poll. I haven't seen the details on it. I haven't seen the sampling size, the questions, and all of those things. And I'll also say this: the Constitution is very clear when it comes to exercising your Second Amendment rights. That is something that we, as individuals that live in a free nation, in a free state, should be able to do. And when you've got a situation where a county within this state knowingly violates state law, let's make sure that we make this point. Jackson County knows what they're doing. They know they're violating Missouri state law, and
It's
they're
also
doing it
federal law.
anyway.
Age limits to buy handguns are also federal law.
As a state legislator, it is my responsibility, it is our responsibility as a legislature to make sure that political subdivisions, which are created by the state, are not in a situation where they are infringing upon the rights of our citizens and ignoring the laws that we put in place. What good is the law if it has no teeth? We're seeing that there are individuals in Jackson County, and unfortunately there may be in some other places in Missouri, that would like to try to override state law. And if there's no teeth to stop them from doing that, then what's to stop them? And so the bill that I intend to file would give teeth to Missouri's law so that political subdivisions aren't able to trample on the rights of their citizens.
I'll let the judges in the robes decide the constitutionality of all this, but I will point to the legal record, which is quite clear that in at least two cases in recent years, the U.S. Supreme Court has upheld the legality and constitutionality of age limits to buy a firearm. And just recently, when Missouri's Attorney General tried to appeal the court ruling that threw out the Second Amendment Preservation Act, the Supreme Court didn't even take it up. So we know that much for sure. On the question, let's focus on the argument itself, though. If you're not old enough to buy a beer, are you old enough to buy an AR-15?
You don't have a constitutional right to drink alcohol. You do have a constitutional right to keep and bear arms. An 18-year-old, a responsible 18-year-old individual should be able to purchase a firearm. Absolutely.
The 21st Amendment did give us the right to buy alcohol, but our conversation with Representative Hudson continues right after this. Representative Hudson, before we let you go, I want to ask you just for your reaction. Perhaps you've seen the news out of Cole County. And forgive me for mistaking Wright and Stone counties earlier. My mistake there. But perhaps you've seen.
I love Wright County too, by the way.
It's not far from you. Yeah. So, but in Cole County, there was a Wright County judge who was presiding over the case there, and he upheld the state's ban on transgender surgeries or medical transitions for minors. Again, here we're talking about age limits. And I just wonder your reaction to that decision.
If I'm hearing you correctly, the SAFE Act, which you may or may not know, I actually helped write and handled in the House. The judge has upheld that legislation that we passed. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's correct. The judge who is originally from Wright County, but presided over the case in Cole County where it was filed for some sort of a court mechanism reason that I don't quite understand. But the judge there ruled that the medical debate and the medical ethics debate is still very much in question, and therefore the court basically sidestepped the argument and left it to the legislature upholding the SAFE Act.
I appreciate that. Look, I spent a lot of time working on the SAFE Act. I talked to a lot of people, and we knew that there was a good chance that this legislation would be challenged. And so we were very careful in the way that we crafted it to do everything that we could to make sure that it would be able to withstand a court challenge. And I appreciate anyone in the judicial branch or anywhere else that would recognize that there are certain things that children should not be subjected to. And when you talk about these drugs and surgeries that would forever alter their bodies, they just haven't cognitively developed to the point where they can make these decisions. And I'm grateful that the SAFE Act still stands.
Stick around. Our conversation with Representative Brad Hudson continues after this. Representative Hudson, before we let you go, I want to ask you just for your reaction. Perhaps you've seen the ACLU and the family who hails from the St. Louis County area, along with Lambda Legal representing them, said they do plan to appeal. So I assume we will hear and see more of this question. The one thing that stood out to me from the 73-page court ruling, I don't think I've ever seen this before, the judge called out a doctor from WashU who testified before the legislature in April of 2022, perhaps you recall this. The judge said that the testimony the doctor provided was false. The doctor testified that surgical operations on minors seeking transgender or gender transition were not happening and that they were not something that would be recommended. And then the judge pointed to evidence that was brought, and I'm not sure if there's a timeline question here, but the judge said that that testimony was ultimately false. What recourse does the legislature have, either looking back, or what mechanism does the legislature have looking forward to make sure that testimony brought before committees there is true?
That's a good question. And certainly when it comes to a situation as serious as this, or really anything that comes before the legislature, when we have someone testify, someone come in, we need to be able to put some faith in that testimony. We don't need individuals that can come in and give false testimony, which may or may not, affect the opinions of legislators that are voting on and crafting legislation. I would be for the legislature doing everything that we can to make sure that when someone has testified in such a way and has done so, has brought false information before the committee, we need to do everything that we can to make sure that that individual is held accountable and that measures are taken to prevent that from happening in the future.
I appreciate you being so generous with your time. I'll just ask you one final question, because just these last few days, this last weekend or so, we've seen some deadly shootings, perhaps involving teenagers and young people in the St. Louis area. And maybe you've seen a joint letter from the mayors of 6 of the largest cities in Missouri to Governor-elect Mike Kehoe, asking him to respect local control, asking him to partner with them on what they would consider common sense gun safety mechanisms or policies. Just at the heart of this local control question, here, I'll ask the question this way. You've got support from some of these groups that have signed on to your proposal. I didn't see Governor-elect Mike Kehoe's name on there. Do you have his support?
So Governor-elect Kehoe and I have not discussed this issue. I look forward to having the opportunity to visit with him about this. Would love to have that conversation at whatever point we can have it. As far as the governor's office weighing in, saying whether they are for or against or what have you about what I'm doing, we have not heard from them on that. We haven't had the opportunity yet to have a conversation with them. I will say this. There's a reason why so many of the areas in our country that have some of the strictest gun control laws are also some of the most dangerous places to live. You don't make people safer by disarming law-abiding citizens. That is not the answer. We want to find an answer. We want to protect folks, but disarming law-abiding citizens is never the answer.
All right, Representative Hudson, we'll leave it there for now, but thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Our full interview with Representative Hudson is up online. You can find that and more interviews and shows on KSDK.com. We'll be back right after this. Political leaders, activists, and donors are analyzing and breaking down what broke down in the Democratic machine in November. But Donald Trump's biggest win of his political career also represents major changes within the GOP. Expert historians told us on almost every major issue, Donald Trump stands directly opposed to the ideas of most of the popular Republican president in modern history in his platform. So let's check the record. 1 week before Donald Trump would take the stage and accept the GOP nomination at the Republican National Convention, Senator Josh Hawley took a different stage and delivered a 28-minute speech
about the future of the conservative movement.
When it comes to the direction of the party, Hawley and Trump see eye to eye on one of the most important issues to voters.
As our borders stand starkly and utterly open, and millions of illegal migrants pour into this country who have no interest in our common heritage and no commitment to our common ideals.
So if drawing a hard line on immigration is the GOP's future, then what was its past? In 1980, former California Governor Ronald Reagan coined a catchy term on the presidential campaign trail.
Let us pledge to each other, with this great lady looking on, that we can, and so help us God, we will make America great again. Thank you very
Reagan
much.
said one thing defined America's greatness more than any other.
I want more than anything I've ever wanted to have an administration that will, through its actions at home and in the international arena, let millions of people know that Miss Liberty still lifts her lamp beside the golden door.
4 years later, the former movie star known as the Great Communicator would go on to win 49 of 50 states in the largest electoral college landslide ever, running on a campaign of forgiveness.
I believe in the idea of amnesty for those who have put down roots and who have lived here, even though some time back they may have entered illegally.
44 years later, the Republican Party's presidential nominee slammed Reagan's idea as an attack on the nation itself.
This Biden amnesty is a direct attack on American democracy.
President-elect Donald Trump has said he plans to use American military to enforce mass deportation. When former President George Bush swore the oath of office to succeed Reagan in 1989, he urged the nation to find purpose in this high moral principle.
To make kinder the face of the nation and gentler the face of the world.
So we asked a Reagan-era Republican, what happened to the GOP?
Josh has said that the old Republican Party is dead and we shouldn't mourn its death, and that's his quote. But the Republican Party stood for some very important principles.
Former Senator Jack Danforth was quoting Hawley, who wrote in 2022, quote, "The GOP is dead." Danforth, an ordained minister, was uniquely qualified to comment on the death of Reagan's party.
This is a service about Ronald Reagan.
Presiding over Reagan's funeral, Danforth said the former president was, quote, "not consumed with himself, and if we have ever known a child of light, it was Ronald Reagan."
Dust thou art, and unto dust thou shalt return.
So was it true that the party of Reagan was dead? We asked Reagan biographer Max Boot.
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot of truth to that. I mean, I think you can see some continuities from Reagan's party to Trump's party, including the fact that Reagan was also interested in appointing conservative judges and cutting taxes. So that, you know, that there's certainly some continuities, but I think the differences are much greater and starker than the similarities. And again, it's impossible to imagine a current Republican president signing a bill as Reagan did that legalized millions of undocumented immigrants, as you just mentioned, or supporting an assault weapons ban, which Reagan also did.
Danforth explained his support for a ban on assault weapons in a 1994 interview with Five on Your Side's Karen Foss.
I ended up voting for the Brady bill and for banning certain assault weapons, and I'm glad I did it, and I think it was overdue. I hope I would have done it even if I had still been active in elective politics when I did it. I really don't know that.
Hawley had offered his autopsy in 2022, a year when Republicans suffered electoral setbacks. So we pressed him for specifics.
If you're going to eulogize someone, the least you can do is name them. Whose Republican Party is dead? Donald Trump's?
Well, I said the party of the last 30 years. I mean, listen, since 1988, the Republicans have won a majority of the popular vote in a presidential election, I think just twice.
This summer, Hawley sidestepped Reagan's popularity to scold other elders in the party.
Republicans of the Bush-Romney era have championed libertarian economics and corporate concerns. Their fusionist faith has become one note: money first, people last. In the name of the market, these Republicans cheerleaded for corporate tax cuts and low barriers for corporate trade.
But Reagan himself had a term for the kind of high tariffs and economic protectionism that Hawley and Trump proposed today.
As a cheap form of nationalism.
36 years later, Danforth wrote his criticisms of Donald Trump into a court filing to the U.S. Supreme Court, arguing against granting a president immunity for his actions on January 6th.
It's much more important than any person or any political party. It has to do with the rule of law.
Danforth was familiar with the rule of law. After serving as Missouri's Attorney General and in the U.S. Senate, he was appointed special counsel by former Attorney General Janet Reno to investigate the federal government's actions at the Branch Davidian compound at Waco.
I was the first special counsel.
While Danforth cleared the government of wrongdoing at Waco, it was there where Trump accused the government of wrongdoing as he launched his third bid for the White House.
If we don't win this next election, 2024, I truly believe our country is doomed. I think it's doomed. Prosecutorial misconduct is their new tool.
The Supreme Court ultimately disagreed with Danforth and granted presidents near total immunity for actions they take in office, and said presidents could give an attorney general specific instructions on targets for criminal prosecution. In a concurring opinion, Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, whom Danforth shepherded through the Senate confirmation process, wrote, "The special counsel's appointment is invalid. Sitting in his law office in Clayton, the former senator, holding his badge from his appointment at Waco, remarked on just how far the country had come.
My friend Clarence, he just erased me.
There you have it. We'll be back at the same time next week. Until then, we're off the record.